I'm calling the November 4th, 2024 Select Board meeting to order. We have one Select Board member participating remotely, so I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Ms. Ackerman?
Present.
Ms. Hardman?
Here.
Myself, Mark Howell here. Mr. McKinnon?
Here.
Ms. Morelli?
Here.
Thank you.
Great. First order of business is public comment. If anyone has a public comment, anyone in the room have a public comment? Okay, online, Tanya, I see your hand raised. Do you have a comment?
Is she not able to unmute herself?
Tanya, can you unmute yourself?
I'm going to take that to be a no.
I know, that's what I was thinking.
She just muted herself.
Oh,
Terry, can you still unmute yourself?
Oh, good.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, Tanya, you should
Tanya,
be
can
able
you-
to unmute yourself.
Tanya, take your hand down so that we at least know that you're listening, that you're able to hear us. Can you take down your hand raised?
Okay.
Oh, she's gone. Oh, no, there you, okay, so you can hear us. We can't hear you. Can you unmute on your end?
Can someone else online that is not Terry try to unmute themselves?
Test. Works for me.
Yeah. Tanya, oh, no, that's just fine. You want to ask Diane?
Diane, will you unmute yourself, please? Diane Proctor?
Yes, I was able to, I believe I've unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, you did. Good, thank you. So
Okay,
Tanya,
I'll remute myself now.
okay, thanks. So Tanya, can you try, we'll give you a few more seconds, see if you can do that. No, I'm sorry. Maybe if you figure it out later and we have a break, I'll let you have a public comment so that it's not because of technical issues that it's happening.
Anybody else for public comments? Seeing none.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Would any of the board members like to remove something from
Wait a
the?
minute, did you say public comments?
Yes.
I did, yes.
Did you, did we already cover, no one else do public comments?
No, well, actually, we waited for a while, but do you want to say something, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, really short.
Go ahead.
We've been talking about this all week, but I just wanted to make a public comment that, as you know, I've been exploring the use of clickers for about 2 years now, both with different people within town meeting, as well as when I was on the town meeting committee with the League of Women Voters, brought it up there, and we spoke about it, I think, on 2 occasions. But in the meantime, it feels to me that with everything that the town meeting study committee is doing, and with some of the results, the positive results of that survey, it feels to me that we're entering into a new phase. And I just wanted to ask if it might be a possibility for the select board to consider having Meridia in, one of the vendors for clickers, and having them come in and speak to all of us, everybody at the select board, the public, the town meeting study committee, but to educate all of us on what the benefits of it, the benefits of clickers, the cost, the mechanics, servicing, leasing, buying, kind of all the devil's in the detail kind of things. And so I just wanted to put it out there, obviously just as a request to ask if you would consider possibly having them come in. I'd be happy to arrange it with you. Or arrange it between them and with you if you like. And I think the biggest thing is that we've seen so many other towns around us adopting them. And I wanted to mention, I wrote this in a letter to you that, Harvard just recently adopted them in 2024. And I thought it was really a noteworthy piece of news that, pardon me?
Keep going.
Oh, just that they did something which I had not heard of other towns doing, which is sharing, and trying to lower the cost through sharing with a neighboring town. And I just wanted to make that, even though I wrote it to several people, a public comment, that I thought that was a unique model that I hadn't heard before. And I also learned that the League of Women Voters in Harvard actually donated them. And so unlike Carlisle, which I think used COVID relief funds to pay for those, that they were actually donated. And I assume it's to support their overall mission of allowing every American that wants to vote to vote. So with these kind of details coming in and people throwing out different pricing and different, benefits and pros and cons and all of it, I just thought maybe we should go to the source and talk with them and have them come in and see what our options are or are not. And would love for you to consider that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I suggest you take that up with the Town Meeting Study Committee, since this is really their purview.
Yes, and I did. I already sent them an email requesting
Okay.
the same thing.
Okay.
But I think that we all need to be, I think that because there's so many interdependent groups that will need to work with them, that it might be a good idea for all of us to be on the same page with the information as,
Okay.
So just a consideration.
Thank you for your comment. Tanya, I think you got yourself unmuted, yes? No.
Muted again.
Sorry.
So Tanya B.
Okay. Anybody else online have a
She was
comment?
briefly unmuted.
Yeah, she was. Okay, that's unfortunate. Okay. On to the consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that a member of the Select Board would like to remove and discuss?
No.
We're good.
Seeing none, I'll move that we approve the consent agenda with thanks to the Collins family and the Garden Club of Concord for gifts to the 250th Memorial Trees gift account.
You're here.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Ms. Hardman?
Aye.
Myself, I'm an aye. Mr. McKinnon?
Aye.
Mr. Ravelli?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move to reappoint Rose Kratzley of 79 Hillcrest Road as co-chair of the DEI Commission for a term to expire May 21st. Let me rephrase that. As a member of the DEI Commission, it doesn't need to say co-chair. She happens to be, but as a member of the DEI Commission for a term to expire May 21, 2027.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Ms. Hardman?
Aye.
Myself, I'm an aye. Mr. McKinnon?
Aye.
Mr. Ravelli?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, Town Manager's report. Carrie.
Okay, thank you and good evening. I want to start with the Doug White Field. I understand last week, or maybe it was the week before, you all received several email messages from people interested in that particular project. I believe that stemmed from an item on the Climate Action Advisory Committee meeting. I did have a meeting scheduled with the co-chairs of that committee weeks ago, and it just happened last week.
Sorry, the co-chairs of
The Climate Action,
Climate Action, okay.
Committee. They mentioned that item has been a standing item on their agenda, and they periodically have had updates. So I didn't go back to look at their agendas, but I assume that is correct. But somehow it sparked the interest of people last week. We have talked before that the town is willing to sponsor a feasibility study and has committed up to $100,000 in ARPA funding to conduct a feasibility study to look at alternatives and to make sure that whatever project we move forward with, it's the right project in 2024, 2025. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in this. There are a lot of different groups that use the field. The field is on school district property. The town has a longstanding agreement with the school district to operate and maintain that property, that field, but not replace it. So we schedule it. Recreation has some use of it, not primary use, but some use of it. We maintain it, we schedule it, but not required to replace it. The Friends of CC Fields have another agreement with the town that is as old as the original agreement, and they are the group that has set aside funding for replacement of that field. So this project has a lot of interest. We'd like to facilitate a process where everybody's voice can be heard, but that we can move forward in a manner that is going to meet the needs of the users of the field. So what I would like to do is just schedule a time on your agenda, the first meeting in December, and just kind of outline what all of the different moving pieces and what we think is a good process moving forward. I'm not sure that it's a decision of the select board, but I think this is probably the best place to start, just to bring some visibility to what we are doing, and then get some feedback from you on how to move forward. So
I think it would be useful to talk about the process, because you're right, a lot of people are interested.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
good.
So,
Great.
yeah, Carrie, just a couple of questions. So a study would be required, a study wouldn't be required to replace the existing turf.
It would not, it's not required. We've been talking about a feasibility study now for so many.
But feasibility
Months-
of what?
What are the options? You know, what is the,
Just to be clear for everybody, the options being, so we have an artificial turf field.
yeah.
So the options being to replace the turf
I think there
or
are,
go to grass? Is that basically the,
I think that's
choice?
one of the that's one of the options that would be looked at in a feasibility study. This is not my area of expertise, but I understand there are different types of artificial turf that are available so at least two different types of turf that are available. If the community wants the town to be involved in the process, it seems like the feasibility study, looking at the alternatives, making sure what we're moving forward with makes the most sense. I think this is what we do. It's a very interesting, unique, odd partnership again, where the town, the field is on the district's property. The town has entered into an agreement back in 2007 to maintain and schedule the field, but not set aside funding to replace. It does seem like people are looking for the town rather than the school or private groups to push this project forward.
I would like to, I don't know whether feasibility study is the right word, but I would like to understand the costs associated with the different alternatives we have in front of us, and also the environmental impacts and the health and safety impacts. So that's one of the things I would like to see from a study.
Yeah. I think that's what we're thinking we would look forward to. If the board is not interested in moving forward with that, then
I think, yeah, I mean, I think we need to. In the last few years, we've had so many concerns over artificial turf, and just to your point, have a public process just to weigh in on
Yes,
all those
I
issues
agree.
is really important. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
your
this-
approach is great.
I was
Talk about
on
approach.
the finance committee when the Doug White fields were first proposed, and it wasn't exactly smooth then, and of course, it was billed as a public-private partnership. It was expected that artificial turf was going to far outlast and outperform turf fields. It's not its first replacement in less than 20 years. It's actually the second replacement, because the first system didn't work properly
Oh,
and needed to be replaced.
I didn't know that.
So, and I remember that there were quite a few voices in the community expressing concern about what turf fields were and how they worked. And so I think that at this stage of the game, we have 15 years of experience with this. We could compute a total cost of ownership for our own field and be in a position to look forward, because I think that's something that really requires major replacement more than once a decade is probably not what most of us were expecting when we voted for this.
So again, what I'd like to do is put this on the agenda for the first meeting in December. We will put forward a proposal on how we see this going forward and take your feedback.
Okay, I think our agenda on December 2nd is pretty full, so we'll talk about it in December.
Okay.
Okay, but either December 2nd or the 16th, I'm not sure which.
Okay.
Okay?
So I'm also just concerned a little bit, or just trying to understand, because I don't understand sort of the urgency, because my impression is that there's an annual assessment done by a third party on the status of the fields.
Yes.
And I haven't seen the report. I think we should get a copy of the report and, and understand what it says. There are people saying like, oh my gosh, the fields are in terrible condition. Like they might not even be playable next year. I don't know exactly.
Right.
So I don't want to jump to conclusions.
Yep.
But I think we need to ground ourselves in like, what is the status of the fields currently? And therefore, what is kind of the urgency around, like, is it something we have to address like really immediately, or what's the time frame that we need to look at?
Yeah.
So.
That makes sense, because certainly some of the correspondence has indicated that it is a problem at the
Correct.
moment. And,
Right.
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
old, and people would say it's probably worn down, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know, like
Yeah.
Right.
what we mean when we say
Okay,
that.
good. So we'll get that when we talk about it in December.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we understand what the town's role in this process is, again, because it feels pretty awkward to me. The Recreation Department is the minority user there, and we're maintaining the field, but not required to replace it. A third party has been collecting funds to replace. So
one of the concerns at the time was what kind of agreement was going to be in place, because of the recognition that it was not wholly owned by one entity, and the representations of both maintenance costs and replacement costs were there, but not necessarily under the control of the town. And so I think it is worth it to review what those agreements say, so that we understand what the controlling documents are, and then figure out where we are.
Yeah, because my going in is it's town decision and it's town property at the point. I mean, it's they're town fields. It's really ultimately the town decision as to what to do with that, right?
Mary, Carrie,
Yeah.
I think my video is disabled. I can't put it back on, but I just, I do agree with Carrie that we should have it on the agenda.
We will.
I agree with Pam that we need to get a report on the current field status. And I agree with Mark. We need to get the old agreements to see what they say. And I also would request that we have some financial information, like how much is in the town budget for this, if there is any anywhere, how much is available at CC at Play, and CCHS funding for this field, and okay, it looks like Shannon put me back on. Sorry about this. Can you guys see me now?
No.
No.
There you are.
Okay.
There you are.
So I'm just requesting that in addition to what Cam and Mark requested, that we have some budget and revenue information on this field, so we can really evaluate the options.
Well, to the degree it's available, because part of the process is to get into all that detail, so.
Right, and
What
part of
we're
it will
gonna-
be what we're asking the study to uncover for us as well, so, but I do think
Right.
we need that information, however we get it. I agree. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Terry.
That was just one.
That was one part of the
I
town
will-
manager's report.
We'll
Go
go
ahead.
through the other items
Go ahead.
quickly. The Light Board will be conducting its annual rate-setting hearing in December. The light plant operates on a calendar year versus a fiscal year, so they are in the process of finalizing their budget. And again, we'll have that rate setting at their December meeting. I wanted to mention that the town has applied for the IRS Clean Energy Credit. We have 2 electric vehicles for fiscal '24, 5 electric vehicles for fiscal '23, that we are applying for this credit for a total of $52,500. So this is the same $7,500 an individual would receive in a credit for an electric vehicle. So we hope to see those funds in the near future. We did issue RFP 25-2006 on October 21, 2024 for a cell tower at the landfill. Megan conducted a site visit last Friday, Megan and Chris Carmody, and had several vendors show up for that. So the deadline for responses is November 25th. I'm not sure what day of the week that is now. Let's see. I wanted to just mention that last week our fire department responded to, 3 times last week out of town for wildfires, not something that we typically hear in Massachusetts, but responded to, I know Salem, Mass twice, and I can't recall the other community. Chief Judge mentioned that this past week there were 12 statewide mobilizations for wildfires, and he said in the last decade he can't remember 12 statewide mobilizations for anything. So that is of significant concern. Apparently the state fire marshal has suggested a ban to outdoor burning this time of year, so stay tuned. There may be an advisory on that coming. I wanted to note that I understand this week our solid waste curbside recycling program, there'll be an opportunity for anybody who's interested in downsizing from a 96-gallon bin to a 64-gallon bin, that will be available starting sometime this week. Anybody who's interested should check the website or call the Public Works Department. I have several other updates from Public Works. The water service line inventory is currently underway, so by November 15, all customers with a water service line containing lead, galvanized metal, or those with unknown materials, homes built before 1986, will be receiving an informational letter from the town. The town operates a lead water service line replacement program. So these are service lines that go from the main that's in the right-of-way to an individual home, and at very low cost, residents are able to participate and have the town replace the service line if it has lead, galvanized metal, or unknown material. We are also currently conducting our water main leak detection program. Leak detection, this program shouldn't cause any water quality issues or upset. So we're hoping there's no inconvenience, but you will see our contractor out doing some testing. So I've mentioned the road work multiple times, and I keep saying the end of November, that the work is going through the end of November. November 15 is actually the date at which we stop allowing private parties to work in the right-of-way, and we will be completing up any of our projects. That might go past November 15, but that's the date versus the end of the month. Let's see. Our Natural Resources Division is conducting its annual fall mowing. There are 25 acres of fields that they are mowing, including Haywood Meadow, Musketequit Triangle, Old Calf Pasture, and Punkatasset Preserve. Their Natural Resources Division is also doing a repair project at the Old Calf Pasture. The boardwalk is being repaired there. There are a lot of other announcements in the weekly report. I did want to end with some announcements on Veterans Day. So on Thursday at the Council on Aging at 9:30 a.m., we will have our annual Veterans breakfasts, and this year they're honoring some town employees who are also veterans, so that's a nice event. We have the Civil War Memorial plaque rededication on Saturday at 1 o'clock, recognizing and honoring George W. Dugan as Concord's 49th fallen Civil War soldier. It feels like this has been in the works for a very, very long time. I hope we have a great turnout for that very nice event. And then I'll end with a note that town offices will be closed on Monday, November 11th, in observance of Veterans Day, and we have our annual Veterans Day ceremony beginning at 7:45 a.m. at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Oh, can I mention one other thing? Sorry. I also wanted to mention that the town of Concord has been awarded $500,000 through the Complete Streets Funding Program, a recent award. Maybe last week there was an official announcement. So the $500,000 award will go to widening and paving an existing stone dust sidewalk on Magnolia Street, the construction of a new sidewalk on Walden Street to Brister's Hill Road, and construction of a pedestrian bike path from Walden Street to Alcott Elementary School. The project will also include ADA-compliant ramps, crosswalks, and signage.
Great.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie, at the beginning you mentioned a rate set in December. Was that CMLP?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good, thank you. Any questions for Carrie?
Yeah, on the solid waste program, it's a little fuzzy when the collection of old barrels is going to occur, or I know it was a range of dates. It said something like the 22nd to the 29th, but it's, I think the signaling is a little unclear about when to put that out. So I'd love to know, but I think that it might be worthwhile to make a more, an actual announcement of, here's the time to bring out your old barrels.
Okay.
And I'm wondering on the water service line inventory, I understood that people will be individually notified on November 15th, but do you have a sense of, what percentage of lead service lines, or is there any sort of quantitative global numbers that we could share about the prevalence of that?
I really don't. I did know last week. I did ask Alan that, but I don't want to throw out a number
Okay.
because I really don't remember without checking in with him.
Sure, not urgent, but interesting.
Any other questions?
Just one, Carrie, your note that I read also referred to Warner's Pond and sort of the task force. I just didn't know if there was, and that might tie into
Yeah.
stuff, if it's, I don't know if it's on your, I was just curious if there was any timing on when they're expected to come back with any sort of, updates or recommendations.
It's not exactly clear yet. Each of the three subgroups that's working on a particular proposal option has had an opportunity to present their work in progress at this
Yep.
stage of the game to the task force. I think we're looking for refinement of that over the next month or so. And then prior to starting work on proposals, the Warner's Pond Task Force had developed a set of criteria that we were going to use to evaluate the proposals against each other once they were sort of finalized. So my sense is that at last week's meeting, we're beginning to envision when that process might start, but more than likely, it's going to push into next year.
Yeah, I was just curious because
Sure.
it showed up on the report, so I
Yeah.
just didn't know if there was a deadline we were working towards or anything.
No, I think that it's fair to assume that we won't see a Warner's Pond article at this year's town meeting.
Got it.
Okay, good.
Good to know.
Any other questions for Carrie?
No.
Great, okay. I'm going on to the chair's report. In line with some of the select board goals that were established for this year, I want to announce that we're going to have our second joint meeting with the school committee and the finance committee on November 18th to have our first look at capital spending requirements for the next 10 years. We're also having several roundtables that will be held within December and January, where the housing groups are having a roundtable in December. I don't have the date. We're also having a commercial roundtable, and by that I mean a forum to discuss what does Concord mean by commercial development. And we're inviting the business groups, the Concord Business Partnership, the Economic Vitality Committee, the Chamber of Commerce, the MCI Advisory Board, the 2229 Task Force, and the public, so that we can have a good discussion of what do we mean by commercial development in Concord. How do we attract businesses here? What are our competitive advantages? What are our core competencies? And if we're talking about generating revenue, get a realistic grounding on what we mean by that.
What was the date for that?
I don't have a date.
Oh, okay.
It's in January.
Oh,
Who's the
January, that
host?
one's January?
It's actually going to be hosted by the Economic Vitality Director.
Okay.
And also, I think we have a sustainability roundtable, and I'm sorry, Megan, I should have checked with you. Are we having a sustainability roundtable?
We are, but it's not scheduled, unless, Megan, you know better, but we're
I
working
don't have
on
a
that.
date yet. I'll circle back this week.
Great, okay. So hopefully, when we meet next November 18th, we will have firm dates for all of these forums. The last thing I want to talk about is a disclaimer that I would like to insert in our correspondences that was in our packet. We don't need a vote for this, but I would like to answer any questions that from members of the Select Board as far as the wording of that disclaimer, and hear your thoughts.
Sorry, where's it?
It's in the packet. It's
Yeah.
on page, I don't know what page it's on. It's under, on number 5 on the agenda, Chair's Report.
I mean,
Shall I read it?
I read it. I thought it made sense, and I think it's important if we're going to be publishing things that we may or may not disagree with some of the comments in those letters. So I think it's important that we have a disclaimer.
Right, yeah, that's. Did you find it, Cameron? Okay, great.
Has this, did our legal
Yes.
folks review it?
Yes, so this was written by Mina and myself.
Okay.
And this is the output of that discussion. I would like to post this at the beginning of every week's postings of letters.
Yeah, so a headline
Mary?
before all the letters.
Yeah, Terry?
I don't seem to have that in my agenda packet. I'm probably looking at an old version. Is this disclaimer short enough that you can read it now?
Shannon's sharing her screen, or I can read it. What would you prefer?
Oh, that's good.
There it
Thank
is.
you.
There it is.
Great. That looks wonderful.
You don't get better than that, Terry. Okay, so I have a sense of the board that we can
Yeah.
do that.
It's good by
Great.
me.
Yeah,
I mean,
same.
I don't know if we need to vote on it.
No, we don't.
Okay.
We don't.
Okay.
Before we leave this topic, though, I would like to say that another one of our goals was to have trainings during the year. We talked about this at our last meeting. I think we discussed different types of training, maybe procurement, maybe open meeting. And I'd like to suggest that we have a training around First Amendment issues, which is kind of a hot topic, especially in our country, but it's happening in Massachusetts as well, where we've got to be sensitive to the rights of that are given to our citizens via the First Amendment. So I think training on that for open meeting, for correspondences would be an important thing and useful. So I'm going to ask Carrie to, actually, Carrie, we already talked about that. So it's going to be November 22nd or December 2 through 3. We haven't got a date. Do we?
We do not have a date.
We
yet.
don't have a date. That's okay.
And this is the First Amendment in general, not that activity that's sometimes referred to as First Amendment audits, which is,
Both. It's how to, it'll help,
Okay.
it'll be helpful to handle those,
yes.
right? Yes. But it will also
Not
be
specific
helpful to
to
handle
that.
less
Okay,
assertive
yeah.
things,
Okay.
okay? So I'm proposing that, and we'll get a date for that. It'll be either late November or sometime in mid to early December. Okay?
getting busy.
Yeah, well, really.
Not just a point.
Really,
There's a lot
really.
going on, so.
Yeah, there really is. There's a
Yeah.
lot going on. Okay, I'm done. I'm going to start. Any questions on any of what I talked about? Okay, chair's report is over. I'm going to move to, look at this, it's 6:35 and we're doing liaison reports. We're good.
You're right on time.
Okay.
Wow. Oh,
Wendy.
All right, okay, so I'll start with the school committee. I know that they have a couple things. They've started, they reviewed their CPS capital plans with the school committee, and I know we're going to talk about this later. I'm not going to go into details, but what I did want to note was there were a lot of projects related, that were energy related, that could benefit from a collaboration that the town has started with the schools looking at an energy management services contract, which I just want to commend Carrie and the team, that it's great to collaborate with the schools and get that. They seem very excited about this opportunity. So this is an opportunity which I'm sure you'll say more about, but the energy savings that are generated can help offset the upfront capital costs for capital. So it seems like it could be a win-win if it works. And I'm sure you'll talk more about it when we get to capital.
Okay, great.
There was discussion about the amenities building. They've pursued some of the design options there. More to follow mid-month, but it sounds like they're all under $2 million and that there has been some plumbing code changes, so there might be fewer bathrooms needed, but there's still an issue with sinks. But more to follow that.
Okay.
And then they also presented their 5-year operating budget forecasts that were presented to the Finance Committee. And Mary, maybe you'll cover those in your liaison reports. They're not the budget proposals. CPS over the next 5 years was projected to range from 2.7 to 3.5. The region ranged from 2.3% to 3.6%. So that's the ballpark. And that's all I'm just going to share on that.
Sorry, Wendy, did you say that was also presented to the Finance Committee?
It was intended to be presented
Very
last Thursday.
preliminary.
Okay.
Yeah, very preliminary.
Very preliminary.
Yep, yep.
They-
It's part of the
they-
standard
That's
process
fine.
with the
I just didn't
Finance
know. I was
Committee.
just trying to catch where, yeah, I
Yep.
heard you say
Yep.
also to the Finance
So they
Committee.
present to the school
Yes, it
committee
was.
before they present to the
Got it.
Finance Committee,
Right.
much like Carrie would do. I will not talk about the Climate Action Committee, because Carrie covered that very well. The Planning Board had a couple things that they were reviewing. Two things I wanted to share. One was around the MBTA communities, the MBTA zoning, that we received from preliminary feedback from the state, but that was preliminary. The greatest concern there was the distinction, the awareness that there was a request that the 50% of the region had to be contiguous or near the train station. The committee sort of reviewed and discussed that and said, given where the state is and their feedback and the lag it's taking to get back to towns, and the concern that we have, and we have 2 train stations, there's a question about whether does that apply or not. The committee sort of said, should we move forward with any zoning changes for town meeting? And they sort of said, no, we think we shouldn't, and we will await for any formal feedback on
Great.
that. So they won't take the time and energy to do that now. We do have a filing that's due at the end of this year, in December. So all the feedback and the technical changes that we are aware of, we'll submit those. So I think that, just want to let people know that
I think that's
what was
wise.
going on. I think it's very wise, so.
Yeah, good.
The second thing was in the area of parking, which we have a goal around. There's going to be some tweaking of the residential parking, more to simplify it. But I also want to note that Mike Lawson and Mimi Graney attended the planning board meeting with a proposal around parking, and specifically in our business districts, a request to sort of waive any parking requirements. And the committee sort of said, ooh, I don't know about that. But they also started to talk about.
What does that mean?
It means
Yeah,
so
exactly.
anytime
So
you have a
wait,
business.
let's wait, just wait.
Yeah, so anytime you have a new business use, there's a number of, when you have a submission, there's parking requirements for a new business when you have a change of use that need to be considered. And so different kinds of business have different kind of space requirements. So the request was in support of the business communities where parking is sort of a challenge. They wanted to see if we would exempt it to help business. So it's an issue about trying to recruit business and make business be more business friendly and avoid any hurdles that we're currently running into. And so, Mary, jump in here because I'm not in the Economic Vitality Committee.
Yeah,
So it was
go ahead. You're doing
it was
great.
a request to to sort of simplify things for our local business. The planning board said, maybe not that, but maybe if we look at if there's a change in use and the new parking requirements are the same as the old parking requirements, yeah, maybe we could waive that, or maybe that's a good idea. So I don't think they walked away with proceeding with any action. They're going to do a little more research on that. But my point was that the planning board is taking a little more action around the business, partly in support for the Economic Vitality
Right.
Committee. So
Yeah.
it's complicated because our bylaws are very specific around parking.
Okay.
But they are starting to look
Yeah.
at some of that. So
That's good. That's good news.
more to follow on that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's things
complicated.
that streamline, right?
Right.
I would be careful about, some of those things, there's requirements on how many parking spots you need per,
Oh, yeah.
Right. Well,
for a reason, is my point. Like to just
Right.
waive it and say like, well, okay, so then, you don't need any parkings.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's also not
Right.
really sort of, that might be short-term gain and long-term pain, right? If you-
Right, right.
So.
But
it
I think
just-
the idea of,
yeah.
there's history with all these businesses too,
Right.
because they may have been waived in the past, or maybe they weren't waived in the past. But if the parking requirements of the old to the new are the same, that seems sort of fairly reasonable. But
I think the issue they're trying to solve is that if there's an empty storefront that had 2 parking spaces assigned to it, and if it becomes vacant, then it might trigger something that requires more parking spaces than the 2. And at least the way I understood the Economic Vitality Committee was hoping to say that if there's a change of use that wouldn't trigger this increased parking, they would still have the 2. So therefore, we can more likely fill these empty storefronts. That's different than saying we don't need any parking requirements
Yeah.
in a business district, right? So, yeah, I think we need some refining. So I'm so glad they're talking about this. That's good.
Yeah,
That's
no, they are.
good.
And just to be clear, it's not it's not new buildings, it's existing.
Existing, right.
Yeah, change in use. And change in use with no change in the footage of the
That's
of the
right.
business as well, so.
No square foot, yeah.
So, okay, so moving on, the last update is on the ZBA, the Zoning Board of Appeals. There was a review of the 40B Thoreau Residence project that was revised. The project is now 2 buildings, 5 floors each, 237 units. 10% are 3-bedroom, 50% are 2-bedroom, and of course, and the remainder 1-bedroom. 25% of those units will be affordable, consistent with those regulations. A lot of discussion around parking, but this is really a preliminary presentation. So now the next steps are really to conduct peer review of the the civil engineering and the traffic studies, et cetera. So there'll be another presentation in December on that project, so more to follow.
How many parking spaces?
There were 474 parking spots, 13 ADA, 40 private garages, but 20% were for EV parking, which is good. So a lot of discussion on, can you consider underground parking, et cetera.
Right.
So
Oh, yeah.
a lot of feedback on that.
What's the revised units?
237.
Sorry, what was it? Is that more or less? What was it before?
I think it was,
more.
it's more.
It's a few
Because
more.
it was 3 buildings, and now it's 2 buildings, but 5 stories.
Is it
Right.
focil fuel free? or
It is
fossil-free?
all electric, but the answer of fossil-free was not clear because gas stoves, they didn't say, that they didn't get to all the
Okay.
details. So I think that question was asked, so it will be clarified. I mean, obviously, our preference is to be completely electric.
Okay, great.
That's enough. And
What about-
Cameron and I are talking on flag policy, but I'll let Cameron talk to that.
Okay, okay. Mark, you want to go next?
Sure. So I already talked a bit about where we are in Warner's Pond. Probably the newest sort of tidbit of information was we had EA actually do an engineering assessment of the capability to do drawdown on the pond. Drawdown is when you let some of the water out in the hopes that you expose part of the bottom to the winter freezing conditions, which is a way of controlling exotic plants. The problem is that the control structures, the sluice and the low level outlet only will release enough water to just about match the average winter flow rate. So the modeling, according to the engineering, is if you open these structures completely, the pond will fall about 6 inches from where it is, which is an insufficient amount to accomplish any kind of plant control.
Yeah.
It was probably designed primarily to allow maintenance of the spillway because, that would
Oh, yeah.
be enough to dry the spillway so that you could go in and do stuff, but not to do this kind of thing. So that was, disappointing to those of us that were hoping that there might be some opportunity for controlling the plants that way. And that's probably the newest fact on that. The MCI Advisory Board participated in the League of Women Voters First Friday forum on last Friday morning. That's up on the YouTube channel, the Minuteman Media Network YouTube channel for anybody that wants to see it. In replay, it was pretty well received. It was a
Great.
It was great.
question and answer. Primarily what that did was it covered for the public sort of where we are in the timeline of the process and the structure that the MCI Advisory Board is doing, which is also using subcommittees. 3, a public engagement one, which is being led by John Boynton, and John took the lead on much of the presentation material. A legal and government affairs, which is being led by Elizabeth Akers-Moore, and the land use group, which is being led by Peter Lowett. And of course, we have the co-chairs of the committee. So we did some Q&A and had an opportunity to talk about how that structure is going to be used going forward to help engage the community, keep people informed, and build on what's going on there. The board also met this morning, or at noon today, in a full board meeting, and at that meeting was primarily dominated by a discussion of the requirements that we're putting into the RFP. So as you know, the state budget has provided funds that Concord can spend to do planning, visioning, zoning. And so the advisory board is led by the land use group is developing an RFP requirements, which will go through the town's procurement process in the hopes of bringing on a firm to lead that visioning and planning effort, and eventually the zoning. And we're working with town staff to get that done. That's probably it for MCI. And then
Can I ask a question
Sure.
about that? Is the RFP going to include, for the land use portion, is that going to include community outreach, or is that going to be separate?
so it does include community outreach as part of that RFP.
Okay.
But we had been contemplating a specific, media, public information kind of role. But Kerry has made available some of the town resources in the form of Donna McIntosh, and so we think that we can deal with a lot of the mechanics of the community outreach, especially in the early going, using existing town staff, which is useful because I think that gives us some time to understand the capabilities of whoever wins the RFP, and then figure out whether we need additional resources later.
Okay.
So that's how that's being handled.
Okay.
The middle school building committee met last week as well. The project continues to be on schedule for the opening in February. There is a new issue there related to lockers for the 6th grade. So if those of us that may be a little ways away from having middle school students may be aware that the 6th graders in the new middle school are programmed to have lockers. 7th and 8th grade students do not have lockers and basically carry their stuff around. There were some custom design lockers in the 6th grade team area, which turned out to be far too small for the average 6th grader's locker. So there's some work being done to look at design alternatives and what the recovery for that might be. The middle school building committee had a special meeting last Friday to talk about how this was discovered, what was known about it and what was unknown, and probably that some decisions will be made about that particular subject at the next middle school building committee, which I believe is November 14th. It's whatever the Thursday is in that week. Yes, the 14th.
Okay.
I think that's it for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Cameron?
Yeah, so just a few things. The town meeting subcommittee. So I think in our last select board meeting, I mentioned that there was some forums coming up. So over the last couple weeks, there was an in-person forum that was held at Harvey Wheeler that I think was well attended. Probably about 35 or 40 people. I mean, many select board members. And so it was nice to have some different discussion there, and a lot of really good live feedback. Also an online forum that was held last week. So there's been a lot of engagement, right, and a lot of reaching out to get sort of feedback from different people in the town around the town meeting. And
How many people were at the online forum?
I wasn't on. I'm
Okay.
not sure,
Okay.
to be honest. We had another subcommittee meeting the day before. So as well on the survey, so the survey is now closed out. We got over 1,000 responses
That's
on
good.
the survey. So, and I think that, Eric Moore and the team, I just want to sort of thank them because it's been a lot of work doing not only the survey, but holding these forums in addition to the subcommittee meetings. So I won't, steal there's some analysis that will be coming, that will talk about some of the things that people have, have sort of supported. And
Can I just interrupt you for a minute? One of the things that I'm hearing from people about the town meeting study committee is I think there's a misunderstanding as far as who they report to, because the town meeting study committee was in fact appointed by the moderator, and it reports to the town meeting.
correct, yes.
So I think a lot of people think that it reports to the select board, or the select board has a more active role in the decisions, and I'd like to just publicly say that's
So they are going to come
Right.
present to us
Right.
next month.
right.
They are going to come present the results of the survey.
They are.
And given that we now have the survey results, they would like to move into some recommendations,
Okay.
right? As far as kind of what it is that they'd like to see, that we might do differently, and things that in terms of. I mean, there's focus in a couple of areas, right? But I mean, one is certainly how we make the town meeting. I'll just say better, right? And for whatever people
that
think is
means.
better based
Right.
on feedback. There are separate things which are things that we're not legally allowed to do at the moment,
Right.
Right. So if you talk about remote voting is a
Right.
classic example.
Right.
So there may be some recommendations that they could make about that, but that isn't something that could be actioned immediately. I mean, the most you could do in something like that is, hey, we could go lobby the state and say, hey, would you eventually let us do something like that? So it'll be split into things that can,
Okay.
let's take the town meeting and say, how can we improve on the town meeting experience? And then secondly, are there some other things that we might consider that would be different from what we do today?
good.
So I think that's that we'll see more of that. And there's going to be actually some really good data on just changes that at least from the survey results that people would say, hey, look, this would be things that would be lead me to be more inclined to attend, those kinds of things. So the committee will talk through some of those.
on the survey?
I mean, it's an input. I think when you have something, it depends on some of the survey. It will be more definitive, right, in certain areas than others, right? So, so the one has the starkest difference is clickers. I mean, 86% of people have said they want to see clickers. Okay, there's other things that might be closer to 50-50, like, hey, if I change this, some are more likely, some are less likely, some don't care, right?
Okay.
So there's some that are kind of more in the middle. There's others that have a pretty substantial,
Got it.
difference in terms of what the feedback is. And so I would imagine that's, going to get some attention.
Good.
So Wendy briefly mentioned the flag policy subcommittee.
Yep.
I know that we were talking about coming back right about now and,
Yep, tonight.
For that. One of the we ran into an additional challenge. So we're not to go into a whole flag policy meeting here, but we've been talking about sort of the issue of one location versus multiple locations. There's another thing that's sort of come up with related to United Nations flags. And so without going into a ton of detail, there's 193 countries for various reasons with no real established policy. We actually choose to fly 89 country flags, which is a little bit of a, how did we get there? How do we decide which ones and why? And there isn't really a policy. And so that's requiring us to do a little bit more digging on that particular issue. And to just, again, to sort of come back with, very clear options on how we're going to resolve.
Okay. You've heard tonight that we have a lot of things lined up. We have a big backlog for December, so that's why I was disappointed we didn't do it tonight. We also have a moratorium, which we're asking the townspeople to be very patient with us, and I think it's time for us to come up with something. So can you commit to a time when you can come back with that, with
Yeah, I
something
think we were
first?
getting close to December, but you tell us, because if December 2nd is really way too busy, then is it December 16th?
Yes,
or
December 16th. December
Okay, yeah.
2nd is crazy.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
okay.
and
16th, yeah.
and because we're so backlogged, we're going to have to be really concise.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay?
We'll
Thank you.
just stick to the issue and
Thank you.
present that.
Okay, December 16th. We'll
So
do it.
that's
We'll do
that.
it.
And then the only other thing was, Carrie, we already talked about at the beginning of Doug White, just because, with the Doug White Fields coming up, I've just had some conversations around public works and recreation groups and just sort of, hey, do we have a role in this? And what's the role and how that, so that we already talked about that. So I
Great.
won't go any further there. So.
So you're good?
That's it.
Great.
Thanks.
Terry?
Okay, just a few very quick things. The 250th committee is working on their report, and I guess they were going to go out to have it printed with some professional printing company, and I'm not really sure. So I'm guessing that most of the select board, do you guys want a printed copy each, or do you want to be able to go on it from the website? And the same for Carrie. Do you want an official printed copy in your office? And Megan?
What is the report?
What?
Yeah, are
What
you
is the
talking
report?
about the 2229?
Yeah, that's different.
Oh, I'm sorry, the 2229 Main Street.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I'd like a hard,
I,
actually, why don't we, after the meeting, we'll let Shannon know and she'll let you know,
yeah.
okay?
Okay, that's great, because there's no sense hiring some printing company if everyone's going to be looking it up. I mean, obviously, it's going to be on the website. So who wants a printed copy is the question. And then I had an interesting meeting with Chris Elliott, who is the chairman of the Hanscom Field Advisory Committee, along with Mimi Graney and Chris Carmody. And the whole meeting was about the economic revenue and the economic impacts of Hanscom. So there's kind of three topics. One is this whole jet fuel. Chris Carmody's going to be working some more with DOR to really understand whether their formula is up to date, and it's possible that we will be receiving a lot more money from the state if we get this formula straightened out, but we're not sure yet, so we'll stay tuned. And then Mimi and Chris discussed for a while what are all the different economic impacts of Hanscom, and the biggest rationale for expanding Hanscom is the economic impact, not just to the Hanscom towns, but to the whole state. But it turns out that they included the military base, which is 90% of the economic impact. And there's a case to be made that it should be done over again with only the 10% that's the private jet area. So you might be hearing more about that. And then finally, I just want to remind everybody to vote tomorrow, if you haven't already.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, I just also forgot to mention, Terry and I were able, and I think, Wendy, you were, we greeted the Nanai visitor delegation
Nanai, yep.
So did I.
last week, and it was great to see them, and we're looking forward to returning the kids were quite interested in our voting process, which they got to witness in person and going on as people were going through their early voting last week.
Right.
Yeah, Kari did a great job.
Okay,
Especially the MCAS question. They were very interested in the graduation requirements and how that's a valid question.
a good ballot question, right.
School kids would be.
Okay, my liaison report. I want to begin by thanking the League of Women Voters for hosting the MCI Forum last week. All of the First Friday events are such wonderful community events, and I want to thank them for all the effort they put into hosting them. They're just wonderful. The community, the Concord Housing Trust met. They're having, as I mentioned earlier, they're having a roundtable in December, and one of the things they will be talking about is their buy-down policy. I've mentioned that before, so they're taking a closer look at their buy-down policy as if that's the best use of funds moving forward. They also voted to send a letter in support of the residential tax exemption to the Select Board. The CPC applications, I think you already know this, they've come in, the total is 1.2 million this year. Last year we had 1.8 to spend, so the applications are less than we'll probably have available to us. It's important to understand that the money will not go away. If we don't spend the whole amount of money that's available, we can put it in reserves and spend it in subsequent years. This year the totals though are 1.2 million. Burton Flint, who's the chair of the CPC, will be coming here in December to give us a quick overview of the applications that he has for that money. As mentioned earlier, the FinCom is busy on their guideline process. They've had very, very preliminary conversations with spending. They are going to be working this week to take a first pass on what they think the impact will be to property tax bills given different ranges of operating budget spending. And the other thing that's different this year for FinCom is they're working collaboratively with the Carlisle Finance Committee to develop a common guideline for the high school that will be shared by both the Concord FinCom and the Carlisle FinCom. So this is something that they talked about at their last meeting. They're going to talk about it again this Thursday night, and hopefully they'll come to an agreement on having a common guideline and what that guideline will be going forward. And then finally, I just want to mention that those old barrels that that are being used by the Ag Committee, so the farmers are very, very grateful to have those old barrels to use on their farms. So that's a cool thing. So how are we doing for time? We're good. Anybody have any questions on anything I said?
Mary, just one comment.
Yeah.
Interesting that they'll have a joint guideline. It's good because actually this year, Carlisle's town meeting is before Concord. Because Concord's is extended, so that actually was probably a good thing.
Good. Yeah. The meeting went well, so we'll see what happens. This it's right now it's still in discussion.
Yep.
We'll see what they decide this Thursday night. Okay.
Mary,
Yeah.
I have two quick questions about what you said.
Yeah.
You said, was it the League of Women Voters that is sending in a letter to endorse the residential tax exemption?
No. The Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay.
The Affordable Housing.
And my other question is, on the FinCom, when they are projecting the effect of taxes on the median house and whatever, they might want to make a footnote about, if you have the residential tax exemption, it's this, but if you don't have it, it's that. I don't know, but it's going to be two different impacts.
Why?
I-
It's not. It shouldn't make a difference. The RT just reallocates it, so, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So the Finance Committee is talking about fiscal '26.
Right.
Yeah.
No decision will
Right.
be made on the RTE for fiscal '26 until a year from now. So
It won't impact the average.
No, I think what Carrie just said is all we need to know.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah. Would you say that again?
yeah,
Carrie?
I don't think the Finance Committee should be put in a position of making an assumption about whether or not this board
Yeah.
will vote the RTE for fiscal '26.
Because we're voting it for FY25 or
25,
not
Right.
yes.
on November 18th. Great, thank you.
Okay,
Okay? Anything else, Terry?
nope,
Okay, okay, good. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is a quick discussion of the town meeting calendar, which you know that the select board votes. I'd like to propose two changes. The first is that we had originally had on the town meeting calendar that the warrant would open on Monday, January 20th. That's the second highlighted row here on the calendar that was in your packet. That is Martin Luther King Day, so I am proposing that we change that to the previous Friday, January 17th. Right? Okay, we'll have to take a vote on that, but let's talk about the other one. And then typically we have something called a town meeting overview meeting, which happens, I mean, this year it's unusual. It's happening so close, it was scheduled so close to when the warrant opens. So there are two, as I see it, there are two issues with this. Number one, the date's wrong because the warrant will just have been opened. And honestly, in the past, these meetings have not really been well attended. And I'm wondering if we should, I'll just throw out what I think. I'm wondering if we should either reschedule it or postpone it for a year until we have time to think about a better use of that Saturday morning.
But Mary,
I just said a lot.
this meeting, this overview meeting has been controversial for a number of years. It's like,
Yes.
what is the purpose? What's
Yes.
the value? And I think we expect to have people who want to put warrant articles to come to the meeting, but they never do.
Right.
So, the schools come and the towns come, but it doesn't always achieve its objective.
Right.
So,
And we've talked about, and Shannon, you've talked about other ideas for this time, that maybe it's more of an educational thing about town meeting. What are some other ideas that we just kicked around? Do you remember?
I think that was the main one,
Yeah.
talking about processes for town meeting. Because I think to Mary's point, if this is around when the warrant opens, sometimes it's too early to talk about what you want to put
Right.
on the warrant.
Right.
And then
Right.
later on the calendar, we have the public hearings where people do talk about what they're putting
Right.
on the warrant. But it could be an interesting idea to have the town meeting study committee
yeah.
talk about while they're active.
So I
That
recall
Saturday
that
morning?
we had a process called the coordination meeting.
Yeah, that's what
which
it's called.
was usually in September. And that was more of it's usually something of a closeout of the prior year. Maybe we knew some things about how we finally ended, and aspirationally what different committees, boards were thinking they might bring forward when the warrant opened in January, but it was preceded by a good 3 or 4 months. So basically it was kind of a kickoff for the fall and a heads up sort of thing. We didn't include that in this schedule. It's, to my mind, too late to even, do that now, based on this. So,
It is.
I think, given where we are,
I don't like to have meetings just because we've always had a meeting,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I do know that this year we've got two things that are going on that are putting us a lot of stress on us. One is the 250th and one is the MCI Concord that just kind of got dumped on us. And I think we've done a great job at reacting and doing the best. But I think this year, it might be an okay thing to just pass over this meeting for this year and then circle back next year and see.
So,
That's my proposal, but I'm open to other.
well, no, I guess this is a question, like what do we lose if we don't have that meeting? Does somebody come back and say, hey, wait a second, I didn't get a chance to
I don't think so, but
do something.
I
I didn't get a
won't.
chance to introduce
I
my
won't.
warrant. Because I'm with you. Like, if you can't explain what you're trying to do in the meeting, like, why are we having it, right? So that's just my only question. Would somebody say, hey, wait a second?
Yeah,
it's
You know-
poorly attended.
right. I would say that the function of the coordination meeting has been largely supplanted by the joint meetings we're having and the capital planning efforts.
Right.
So that
That's a good point.
that coordination meeting used to surface those kinds
Yes.
of things.
Yes.
We're thinking about bringing forward this, that, or the other major capital project that nobody's ever heard of outside of Committee XYZ that was cooking this up, and so that gave other committees an opportunity to hear that was coming, and then sort of adjust accordingly, and some negotiation took place as a result of that. But I think we've actually institutionalized some of that through the processes.
Great.
So, why we would wait till the day before the warrant opens and say, let's have an overview of that. Everybody's done their paperwork by that
But,
point.
I think to Shannon's point, maybe it's not the people who do this day in and day out all the time, but it's the people who, it might be someone who wants to propose a warrant article, who's never done it before, doesn't know, and maybe the moderator could give us some feedback on what would help her as people present warrant articles. It doesn't have to be on Saturday. It could just be an education session for one night, I'm not.
She does meet with them individually.
I know, but if
I know.
someone, do they know that they can go to your point about education? This is how you write a warrant article. You could talk to the moderator.
We could
that
do
kind of thing.
something. Yeah, I'm not sure this year is the right year to do that.
I mean, it may not, a fact sheet might be good too. I just,
Yes.
I know we do have something online for citizen petitioners that's sort of like a how do I, that gives some steps about that. When I spoke with the town clerk about the idea of tabling this meeting, I think she also thought about, well, is there still a forum for citizen petitioners to talk things through? And I responded, I think how you did too, that they can always speak with the moderator. And anytime someone maybe calls our office and asks those sort of questions, I always direct them to Carmen.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does a good job with that. She really does.
Yeah, so if we can just make that maybe more visible, right? Even put like, hey, if you're interested, here are the 3 things that can help you.
Yeah.
Maybe it supplants having to have a meeting where somebody might come and ask.
Yeah.
So there's on the town meeting tab on the website, you could have something there. I think that would.
Yeah, I can take another look at that and make sure it's clear.
Okay. We have a comment on, Diane, do you have something to add?
Yes, just quickly to say that as a former chair of the CPC and ongoing, that meeting is always confusing for us. Because we never quite know what we're supposed to do there. So, I think it was already worked up, our warrant and everything else for citizen petitions. Even if they aren't in good form, Carmen works with them so carefully. And I know this from our league work in their presentations. So, I feel like, there may be a good use of that time, but I would just, speaking as one chairman, having attended a lot of those meetings, it is a bit confusing and hasn't always been very helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, are we ready for a motion?
Sure.
Sure.
Wait a minute, I have,
Terry,
one
sorry.
comment about the Friday.
Yeah.
That you're changing
Yep.
from Martin Luther King to the Friday.
Yep.
So does that mean that we have to have a select board meeting
No.
to open the warrant?
No, we don't. We checked, Shannon checked with Kari, and it does not require a vote of the select board.
Great.
Yeah, good question. Good question. Good. Okay? Okay.
Great.
Move to approve the amended town 2025 annual town meeting calendar as discussed.
Second. Roll call.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Myself, I'm an aye. Mr. McKinnon?
Aye.
Ms. Ravelli?
Aye.
Thank you.
great. Okay, 10-year capital plan, the main event.
So I would just like to introduce our CFO, Anthony Ansaldi, and Anthony, I'll let you introduce your staff person who's here, who is also a veteran, I should have mentioned.
And your name?
Zach.
Zach.
Sorry. Yeah, this is Zach Lamoureux. Zach has been with us now for, is it 2 months or is it 6 weeks? 2.5. Time just flies in buying Concord.
Been busy.
Yeah. So Zach is our senior financial analyst working in the finance department, a position that we've had
Welcome.
Thank you.
vacant for a while, so we're happy that he's joining us in the right time. All right, so just to kick off, and I'm going to just share the screen, I'll let Zach do some driving for us. So first of all, in talking about the capital budget, the 10-year capital plan actually closed on Friday. So what we have, and departments had about 30 days, maybe a little bit over 30 days, to enter request. And different than prior years is we're using this software right here called ClearGov. So what this does is, ultimately, the entire budget is built in here, including the budget book gets built in here, and then it all gets pushed out to become a more transparent document and increase transparency with the community. So we're really excited in using this, this program, and it's certainly, we're still working through some bugs and learning it. So right now, when you're looking at a number right now, this is actually the 10-year cumulative total of capital requests for just the town. So that's total is $386 million. Sounds like a lot of money because it is a lot of money, but that includes 2 public buildings. That would include a public works facility down the road and a public safety.
So just to be clear, not just so not the schools?
This is not the schools. The schools is not in here
Okay.
yet. Carrie and I are meeting with the schools on Thursday. So ideally.
And these are requests. This is not something that's been sort of vetted,
Oh,
scrubbed
it hasn't been
down.
vetted at all. Matter of fact, just in looking at this, there's a lot of.
This is the starting point of what everybody put in.
Right.
What's the 195?
That's the number of requests. Yeah.
Also
Individual
included is 25 million or so in public works infrastructure, which is
The roads.
new. So the 10 years, 2 buildings, and a lot more for roads than you've seen.
Oh,
Right.
still, though, that's a big number.
Well, remember, it's over 10 years, but it is a big
Okay.
number, yes.
Okay.
So if you just scroll down, this is the initial dashboard, and I'm not going to get too involved in it, but this is the type, scroll back down just so I can see the top, yeah. So the chart on the left, it actually breaks down the capital cost by department. So in the years to the left is the 10 years. So you can see the cumulative total for each of those years is to the right. So in 2026, we're looking at, right now, there's asks in there for $32 million, which obviously I think you all know that we don't have $32 million. We're only working off of our policy, which is, call it around a little over $3 million for an estimate for Tier 1, and then the $4 million to $5 million for Tier 2, which would be borrowing. So the table to the right is the capital cost by department. So that's the total by each department, and then and then a visual graph to see where the big requests are coming from. And that, I can tell you that purplish, not purple, pink, fuchsia, magenta.
Magenta.
Okay, we'll go with magenta.
Magenta.
That's a facilities. So that's a facilities, those are the facility asks, which is the lion's share of the request. Zach, if you can go up and just choose the funding source.
Can I
So-
suggest you could probably drop the pennies on these?
Yeah, really?
Might as well round to the nearest dollar.
Round to the millions.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well, 195 is $2 million, is slightly less than $2 million average, so it's a lot of projects.
It's a lot of projects. Yeah, it's a lot of projects. So this view is looking at funding source by year. So what we did is we identified all the various funding sources, and if you look to the right, it's a little bit clearer. There's the borrowing, there's the capital outlay, which we've talked about. Chapter 90 is road work. Had in there for community preservation funds. We haven't worked with them. I think that there could be a use for the CPC to actually use this program, because I think it's that good that might be able to help them. But anyways, and then scrolling right down the various, whether, if it's a revolving fund, it comes from the revolving fund, or if it's the enterprise, it could be retained earnings. So part of what the requests are is actually defining what funding source it is. And that's something that sometimes department heads are not quite sure, and that's why we need to vet that a little bit more. So I wouldn't put any stock right now into that, because, like I said, we haven't vetted anything. But we did want to show you if what ultimately a request looks like. So, Zach, can we go to that fire department?
Before you move, Anthony,
Sure.
I just want to make sure it's clear, people understand, this is all funding sources. So you're seeing, when you looked at that first number, you're seeing water, sewer, electric, BD. When you're seeing retained earnings, these are funds set aside in the enterprise fund to pay for
Got it.
Right.
projects through cash. These are all projects. These are not all property
Oh,
tax funded
Got
projects.
it, okay,
Right,
thank
right.
you, thank you,
Yeah.
that helps a lot.
I wouldn't recognize tier 1, tier 2 as funding sources. I would recognize them as projects sizes. So I get that some are borrowing, some are, and I think there's some obvious roll-ups that make sense to do in terms of what's actually property tax supported or general fund supported from the property tax versus something like, CMLP revenue or fees.
All right, thank you for the feedback.
Yeah.
So this is what ultimately, we're hoping that it actually gets built into the, what would be a capital book or online, what it would look like. So this is Chief Judge, his turnout gear replacement. So, in the overview, it talks, it mentions the period of time for which the projects will take, and it's usually just the fiscal year. Scrolling down the description is something that I put a lot of emphasis into, really having departments explained why you need it, what's the benefits of having it, what's our policy on replacing these various items, including inventory with that. So I know what exactly the plan is for the next 10 years. Also with that, to vet the cost, because there's a lot of numbers here, I asked them to go and get price quotations and include that. So as we scroll down a little bit more, you'll see Chief Judge did that. He included a couple of pictures of what turnout gear is. If a person that maybe is not familiar as much as we are, doesn't know what turnout gear is for the fire department, they at least will get a visual too. And then there's those supporting documentation that has the quote. Now, recognizing that the quote's now and the cost will change, we asked the vendors to give us their escalation, best guess escalation cost on that.
Anthony, do you ask them here if they anticipate any expense savings because of this investment?
So that's not part of the narrative, but it is something that we stress when going through it. And that
Do you
obviously,
have a place to collect that?
we could incorporate that. If we do see a savings as a result of this, we can incorporate that into the narrative.
Okay.
Yeah, because we got to, the business case, right? It's easy to spend money. But, the business case of what's the benefits, and even asking the question, and what would happen if we didn't spend it?
Right.
What would you do?
Right.
Like, what do you
Right. So, and if you scroll back up for a second, Zach, to his description. So, fire department just doesn't buy turnout gear because they have to. And we wanted to make sure that that's explained, that it's actually required, that turnout gear is only good for 10 years. And we never want a firefighter in turnout gear that's expired. There's a tremendous liability to the town. So we really wanted to spell out where that comes from, and that falls with the NFPA standards. So that's why we asked them to talk about the NFPA standard and what that is. And then we talked about our current practice on how we currently are rolling out the various equipment. And then we also talked about the annual escalation from year to year. It's referenced there too. So
this is, we have to do it. We have to have this gear, and these are replacements.
we have to have this
Right,
gear, and this is a
okay,
replacement.
Okay.
But we want to make sure that the numbers are tightened up. And, in the past, I think you may have seen, if you go back and look at prior capital plans, it was just a $50,000 number
Right,
from year to
you're
year.
right, yeah.
Well, now we want it,
Yep.
it's not necessarily, you don't need $50,000 every year, and we don't want to keep capital projects open for a number of years and then go back to the oldest one. Gets a little bit messy, it gets a lot of work for finance, and quite honestly, it's not necessary with good planning and good, and a good plan on how we're gonna roll this out. And that's what we're really doing, is rolling it out to the needs. There's no sense tying money up that we're not gonna use for 2 years from now, because
Right.
as you can see, there's a lot of requests. So, all right, we can scroll back, let's scroll back down. And then, on the bottom of this, it'll just summarize, his total over 10 years was $447,000. Those are the breakdowns on the left by year. And then, because this is all just equipment, it's in the category of equipment at 100%. Is there anything else below that? And then it's just a summary chart. Yeah, and then funding sources, too. So we can back out of this.
So Anthony, when I was on the Finance Committee, ClearGov was furnished a lot of benchmarking data. Do they have benchmarking data?
So that'll be part of our budget book, yeah. So
Okay.
that's how they originally started out, was doing that.
Exactly, that's what they
yes.
did,
And they
yes.
built upon it, and they've gone to the capital budget, operating budget, and they're building out so much more.
Okay.
So part of our, if we went into our digital budget book, you'll see that the benchmarking that you've seen in the past will
Yes.
actually be there too.
Okay, okay. How detailed can they benchmark? I mean, could they look at a town like our size or
Well, what they do is they, for like demographics, they're pulling from the United States Census. The last one was done in 2022. If we
Yeah.
had our own individual information that we wanted to include in that, if we had more recent numbers than that, then we could add to that.
So it's crowdsourced, or I don't know if that's the right word, but they depend upon people putting things in so that they you could benchmark
Exactly,
against each
yeah.
other.
They're just drawing it
What's
off
the right
of,
word? Doesn't-
I know what you mean. I don't
You know
know.
what I mean?
Yeah, so they're just grabbing the information and just making it visible in one place for the
Right,
community.
okay, okay.
Right.
So Anthony, I
Yeah.
mean, one thought, and I don't know, exactly what the software does versus what you have to do manually, right? But, getting people to think about, so I go back to kind of that business case concept, right? But getting them to think about, okay, I'm making an investment. It isn't always hard dollars, right? But, okay, is it a compliance issue? Is it a safety issue?
Right.
Is it an employee, satisfaction or something issue? Is it a cost savings? Like, there's got to be strong reasons why we're doing this, or making that type of investment. It can't always all be hard dollars,
Right.
right? But there needs to be sort of that, clear justification, right? That, hey, here's why we're doing this. Here's what we're going to get out of it.
And that's what we were hoping to capture in the comments and the overview. So, and some departments did a really good job
Yeah.
at doing that.
Yeah.
And then there's others, while we're going through each of these 195 requests, we'll probably be shooting
Yeah.
some back.
Well,
for
that's
some
all I'm saying is
clarification.
it sometimes helps to just almost get like, hey, you know what? I'm going to ask every time it's one of these 5 categories. Like,
Right.
you have to show up and you have to justify it. It's got to
Right.
be one or many of these things, or else you're going to get a kickback.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Right, yeah, this is, believe me, I'll be sitting down with each department head, going through each request individually. I'm sure by the end, they'll probably not like me, because I'll send stuff back to little clarification, but, I think it's important for the community to have that information, because, these are real dollars, and we want to make sure that we let the community know that, we're taking that seriously, and we're really vetting each project, and spending a lot of time on that. So, overall, that's, happy to answer questions, but that's, again, I haven't reviewed any. I've worked with some departments, fire, police, and public works, worked with us for the last 30 days. Other departments are some of the smaller ones, don't have as many requests. I think probably 85% is public works, public safety up there right now. So there's a lot of work to be done, obviously, for the 18th, which we'll get tighter on some of the funding sources, making sure that department had selected the right categories. That's what they'll be going through, but you'll still see some raw, still unvetted. The 16th of December, we'll have the plan.
On November 18th, we're really only interested in capital that's, well, I don't know, are we? I thought we were only interested in capital that was going to be funded through the general fund, right? So,
And we can focus on that. And
Yeah.
we can just briefly have a slide on, or
Yeah.
not, but
Yeah,
that,
I mean,
it'll be
things that are-
broken down, but you're right, we'll be spending more time on the general fund.
good, like any Chapter 70 or any of the enterprise fund, I don't think that's
No.
going to be part of that conversation. Okay, right, that makes sense.
So this is I think it's a great tool, and you're going to get your business case, to Cameron's point on there. I'm sort of struggling on how we're going to use this tool. Is it going to be, so on the 18th, would you expect to sort of create an excerpt for this? Is it all going to be just a visual that we're
No,
going to see?
I'll have some kind of presentation and summarize something for that. In that committee that's working on this is Carrie, myself, and Dr. Hunter. So, we're meeting, like we said, on Thursday, and we'll probably have another meeting before that, just to,
Many.
present the overall.
Good. If
Look
it could be a
for-
consistent format, that would make it a lot easier
Yeah.
for us to understand and
Right.
ask questions.
Right.
So this is available? Can we go and look at this ourselves, or is this only?
Not yet,
internal?
it's still a work in progress, but eventually, when it gets pushed out, it'll get pushed
Okay.
out through the website, and you'll be able to drill down.
Okay,
Even with
Yeah,
our
I'd like to-
operating
I'd like
budget,
to-
you'll be able to, ideally, we'll be able to drill down right to personnel. So when you hit the personnel cost, if you want to see what each salary is associated with that, it's going to be there. It's public record, and we want to put that out there.
that'll be, yeah, I would like to play around with this.
Yeah.
And we'll find out if there's a way that we can maybe put something out.
Yeah, these all build together. You start with your capital, you have your personal and your operating budget.
Yep.
The way ClearGov works is it breaks up into those pieces, and it all comes together to give you your digital budget book and a way, your transparency to actually have online.
Uh-huh.
We can tailor it to the needs that Concord has and make it really robust and available for the public to view and understand what we're funding, what we're doing. And then people can go on, look at it, and have a clear picture.
So Zach, do you have experience with this software from a prior?
I do not.
Don't?
I-
Sounds like-
this is-
sounds like a
I-
salesperson.
Life now.
I have spent a lot of time working with this program, Anthony together, trying to figure it out, work out all the issues that we've run into.
Okay,
This is Zach's main project, so he's been working a lot with
Okay, so-
ClearGov, and we're still learning the software. There's obviously a lot to it, and what we can ultimately push out, is something that we're still working through,
Okay.
what that looks like. Happy
You
to
know,
answer
one-
more questions.
yeah, one of the things, just thinking ahead when we're looking at the operating budget, I think December 2nd is when we're going to have the first look at the operating budget.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that. That's what I was thinking when you were saying December 2nd was heavy.
Yeah, it's very heavy.
Yeah.
Whenever we talk about it, we'll have to, one of the questions I have is, now that we're doing all this upfront investment in these software enhancements, what do we expect down the road for savings?
I can tell you that there's going to be a tremendous amount of time savings, and my time is also money for the community too. So just to get that right now, I wouldn't have been able to really do that using spreadsheets, because we would have had a lot of multiple spreadsheets that I would have had to link together.
Yep.
It would have spent a lot of time, and I wouldn't have been up here today not talking about this, because it just would have been impossible. This has sped up hours already worth of my time, which allows me to work on our next agenda item.
Okay. Anybody else have questions?
No, I think it's a great start.
Yeah,
I mean, go ahead, Mark.
I'm looking forward to seeing how it works out. I mean, I have comments about the capital programs, but we'll save that for when we're actually looking at the data.
Yeah, I think it's great stuff. I think we just got to keep challenging people, you know, how do you prioritize, right? I think to Mary's point, you know, if you're going to make some of these investments, how do I sort of cash the check, right? What do I get for it?
Yeah, and we did, you know, if we went into how the departments entered their request, what we asked them to prioritize too. So there's different levels of, you know, highest, there's 4 or 5 different categories of how important is this and why is it important. So it goes a little bit deeper into the nuts and bolts of the program, but those are certainly questions that we asked.
I guess asking the managers to prioritize is one perspective, right? But I don't know what criteria they use to prioritize, whereas I think, as I think Cameron was talking about before, the categories that we were talking about would help us prioritize. Is this necessary? Is this an expense savings down the road? You know, we might
Right.
have different criteria.
Sure.
That's my point.
Yeah, particularly in the area of compliance or regulatory, understanding those, how that fits in is important. Or, you know, efficiencies is true.
So, yeah, I think it's a good start. Looking at taking a harder look at the numbers and what we can afford is the next thing.
Right.
Okay. We good?
Yeah, it's a great
Terry,
start.
you okay? Terry? I guess she's okay. Okay, great, thank you. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Okay, next is the pilot.
All right, let me just stop sharing one.
We're back on schedule.
Yes, that looked very good to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Okay, pilot.
All right, so I prepared a few slides, 5 or 6, just really brief to introduce the topic. Meredith, come on up here. All right, so this is to talk about the first look at the payment in lieu of taxes, the pilot policy. With that, on the pilot working group was Mary, you were on, Mary Hartman, our Select Board Chair, Lois Wassoff, our Finance Committee Vice Chair, Kerry, myself, and Meredith Stone, our Chief Assessor, was all worked on this policy and all aspects of this presentation. So this obviously ties into your goals as a Select Board. This goes right in line with Section 4 of the Financial Planning and Stability, and looking at increased revenue generation and pursue pilot agreements is certainly one way of doing that. With that, for those folks that, you know, pilot is not what we think, right? It's not flying a plane. It's actually payment in lieu of taxes, and payment in lieu of taxes help local governments offset losses in property taxes due to the existence of non-taxable state, federal, and other nonprofit entities. So when we look at Concord is approximately 26 square miles. The taxable land is about 89% in Concord, while the non-taxable land is 11%. Of that 11%, we looked at 4 categories. Land that's owned by the town, and that's at 39%, and that includes public buildings, streets, sidewalks, open space, and other public uses. State government was at 12%, and that's land that's owned by the state, MBTA, MassDOT, and Massport. And it's a town. And then the exempt nonprofits come up with 43% of that 11% total. So looking more closely at those, what those means in compared to values. So of those 4 categories, if we just looking at the other exempt, the total value of those is $487 million. And the column to the right of that is if that was taxed at 100%, if those were taxable entities, that would mean approximately almost $6 million of taxes to the town. It's not. So what this pilot policy does is it tries to capture 25% of what that would be. And why 25%? Well, nonprofits don't take full advantage of everything that a homeowner may do or a business. But what they do have benefits through is with public safety and public works. So when we looked at that percentage of our budget, it was approximately 25%, and that's pretty consistent with other communities in Massachusetts using that 25%, including.
Sorry, other communities that
That have pilot.
have pilot
agreements.
programs?
Yes, that have pilot programs, and that would be Boston would be one, Brookline would be one, and I know the Collins Center is working on a few others, but they use that 25%.
So how do they use that? What do they, because it's a voluntary, right? I mean, it's all
Well, that's the goal.
negotiable, right?
That's the goal. Remember, and this is all voluntary. As
Right,
much as we
right.
have this policy, it's a matter of negotiating and
Yep.
really helping nonprofits realize that they do have a drain on our resources too. And we're trying to have them work with the town and try to recapture that. And, I know from my experience in Brookline, that's not necessarily done on day one. They've ramped it up over a number of years, and it's all part of a negotiation to get there, because it still would be a lot asking for a lot of these nonprofits that, may not have, funds and have to plan for that. So, and that's all, what you can work with them and try to recover up to the 25%.
Anthony?
Sure, yes.
So first of all, thank you so much for working on this. It's long overdue. I know it's going to be a long, long project, but thank you for starting it. I do want to comment about the 25%. I think in your next slide, you're going to say that and you just said it's based on public safety and public works. And we do have an unusual situation in Concord, though, where there are some of our exempt properties have school children that are attending the Concord Public Schools or the high school. And so I think that's a factor that has to be involved in the negotiations as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Terry, and that's something that we would do the research, because it's not, these are the big departments, but you're right. There is some other benefits that they may get via school bus transportation to private schools, et cetera. So those are conversations that we would have internally to really try to determine what other resources besides the three, the big departments that I mentioned, what other.
Oh, well, I guess the reason I'm bringing it up, it's not just the transportation, it's actual kids of
Right, yes.
professors that attend the schools.
Yep.
And so, but not for all these institutions, just some of
Right.
them. It's on a case-by-case basis.
That's exactly right, Terry. That one we'll be reviewing on a case-by-case basis before we even start the conversations with these entities.
Right.
Can I ask a question on this slide?
Sure.
So the $487 million assessed value for these other exempt, does that go through the same kind of scrutiny that the homes in town go through? I mean, do you have confidence in that number?
So what we did, I do have confidence in the number. We do value every year, and this year we had an additional service come in and make sure that they were up to par, and they've been certified today.
Okay,
So yeah, I
Right.
do have confidence in
okay,
it.
Yeah,
okay.
knowing that we were going to talk about this, if we really want to make sure that we have the values, we did spend a little bit of extra money to make
Great.
sure that we had up-to-date values on all of
Okay.
these.
And one more question. So that 1.5 million, which we could get if everybody was paying 25%, does that include the 450 we're already getting from CMLP?
CMLP would be under the town, so that.
Good, okay, good.
Yeah, so that's
Okay,
separate.
great.
So that's separate.
Thank
And I
you.
mentioned a few of the pilots that we exist and have that are not included, we wouldn't be including that 1.5. The state-owned land is 872,000
Yeah, that's-
that they're supplying with us. We get some from the Fish and Wildlife and Department of Interior, very small amount of $3,000, $3,500. Like you just mentioned, CMLP, that's an
Okay,
approximate 450. I think it's 459. And then the Concord Housing Authority does have a pilot agreement with this board, and they've contributed, 26,000 was the
Okay.
last.
Okay.
What's the basis of that? It's been about the same, but, from is it a
450?
percentage of what's 26 as a percentage of their,
Oh, the
Valuation.
Concord Housing Authority?
yeah, the housing authority? I'm sort of curious about what the basis of that
Why don't we
pilot
ask
is.
Stefan?
Well, I may not know, but our CFO might know. Should know too.
It's on. Stefan Bader, Chair of the Housing Authority. 10% of the rents generally is the starting point for our contribution.
10% of rents,
Yeah,
okay.
So,
Which is interesting because
which is not a value-related formula, it's an income-related
Yeah.
formula.
right,
Yeah, the CMLP
Yes.
number is based on,
the value is an asset.
Sale.
I thought it
Electricity
was sales,
sales.
right? Yeah.
yeah, electricity.
Oh.
But then,
It's also interesting that the state is apparently near 50% of their rate,
Don't
872.
tell them.
What?
It's a shh, don't tell them.
So do some other towns do more than 25? I think to Terry's point, there's some additional services. I mean, I think the concept's great. I think we should be pursuing the pilot. I don't want to negotiate against ourselves. I'm not trying to gouge people either, but, you know, like what's, I don't want to, you know.
25% is what, the only percent that I've heard that communities are using.
and to your point, it's a negotiation, right? It probably won't be 25%.
You know,
Well, I guess my point is
It's
if
case by
we're trying to
case.
start at
You're
25 and go
starting.
down, like, I mean, you know, are we
Well, no,
negotiating
you could be
against
going
ourselves?
up. You could be
No, but
going
that's
up too.
right. But that's why, like, if you ground on a number, people will. Oh, okay, then I can. Like, do you have to put out a number? Can you just say, look, we're doing this program, you know?
well, we want to set
Doug.
the expectation of,
Right.
you know, what we're trying to, and keep everybody treated the same and fairly. I think when you treat everybody consistently, then, you know, you have a better chance of success with something like this. So I think 25% is a vetted percentage that every community goes to see if it's about that. And we did, and we were pretty close to that number. So I feel comfortable with 25%.
Yeah, that's a good point. Steve Cirillo, who's from the Collins Center, made that point, that you want people to feel like they're all being treated uniformly. And this is something we can actually point to. That's a good point.
When I read through the policy, though, it did occur to me that the event that probably is most challenging for us as a community is when a piece of property transitions from you know, an otherwise taxable status into one of these non-exempt things. And I think those situations occur. And I wonder whether the policy captures the notion that when, you know, a parcel becomes owned by a not-for-profit and therefore goes off the tax rolls, there might be some way of at least tapering that impact, you know, going from, you know, arguably some house becomes part of a, so the you know, it goes from 100% to 25 on some ramp or something that we could understand to mitigate some of that concern instead of having it just suddenly disappear.
So you're talking about a property that is currently 100%
Yeah.
taxable?
Yeah, let's say a
Well, we had
nonprofit.
a private residence
Right.
who I believe was the largest taxpayer in town, and that property was purchased by the Audubon, Mass Audubon.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So that would be
Oh, yeah.
an
Yeah.
example.
An example, right. So it seems to me that at that point, it might make sense to ask that institution to, you know,
Slowly.
help us manage the impact of that loss of revenue. So it was, you know, just because I understand that they're moving into a nonprofit status, but that's a loss, a noticeable loss for the town. And so I understand the service-based buildup that says, hey, you're getting some benefits from us, but then there's also the other event-driven occasion for engaging in this conversation, I think.
Depending on when they buy it, they have to pay the taxes for the rest of the year, and then
Yeah.
they go off the tax rolls. So they do finish up with the year depending on the purchase day.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the last slide just breaks down that $484 million of exempt properties. And I know the number on this slide is a little different than the previous slide, but for the sake of having this conversation, I was okay with, because I'm sure we just have something categorized in a different area. But This breaks it down and what the types of classification those properties have.
I don't see healthcare on here. Isn't that one of our largest?
It should be. You have two educational.
Oh, there is two educations.
Right.
I'm guessing,
I'm guessing
One of
that
my
One of those,
the
yeah, it
second
was-
educational
right,
private
was
is
probably
healthcare.
healthcare.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, me too, because it's a big number.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
And that's it with the slide. We're happy to continue to answer questions, and you have your policy in your packet that we all spent a lot of time on, so.
So Anthony, I do have one question. I understand it's under number 1 on the policy, and it speaks to tax-exempt institutions within the community that own real estate, and then you have or that rent real property from the town. Is that because of the housing authority? I mean, I'm just not sure what that represents. An example might help me just understand
That's
how that would
probably
apply.
51 Walden is an example of a nonprofit that rents property.
For $1. Right,
Oh.
okay,
The
okay,
Umbrella Center.
Yeah.
Umbrella would be another one.
okay.
Oh, good, okay.
All right, so again, all right, still nonprofit, okay.
And
Okay.
town-owned property to boot.
Yeah, okay. That's what I guess, maybe that's what confused me, because it's town-owned,
Right.
yeah.
So I thought that we should maybe think about this and maybe take a vote next meeting, unless people feel like we're ready to vote, or how would you?
Mary, can I ask a few more questions?
Sure, go ahead, sure.
Yeah, and I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing, so if everybody could speak right into the microphone, that'd be great. So I think it's item number 2 in the policy where you specifically say about public works and public safety. I would recommend adding something about and other services or something because of our previous conversation. I mean, it's a very large amount of the budget. If an institution is sending school children, it's a much higher percentage than the 25%.
Good, yes, I agree.
And then in the slide, Anthony, where you had it highlighted in yellow, is that the annual tax revenue that you're estimating?
Yes.
Okay, and I know Mary asked, but I didn't hear the answer. Is the 400 and whatever thousand from CMLP already included in those numbers or not?
It's not with the other exempt entities. It's included with it would be under the town category.
But I mean, is the annual tax revenue, if it's 25% on that slide, was like 1.5 million?
Yep,
Yep.
it's not in there,
That is-
it's not in there, Terry.
Without.
Oh, great,
CMLP.
okay. And
Like,
finally, I had a
I
question
think
about
1.2
Department
minus that.
of Interior.
This.
It looked like it was about 7% of the
that's
properties, but it
excluded.
was only
I did the math on that.
$3,000 coming in for the pilot, and I didn't know
Yeah.
where that
Well,
number came
They're
from,
all up here
whether
too.
that can go up.
It's the same as the state. That's just, it's the state determined their amount, the federal determined theirs. I don't know how they came up with that number, just like I don't know how the state would really come up with their number.
All right, so it's research that can be done.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And then, I guess,
So I
Anthony,
didn't understand that. So Terry, are you suggesting we do that, or I didn't follow that last comment.
Yeah, but this is an ongoing multi-year project. It doesn't have to be done before we vote or anything.
Okay, okay,
I think the change that I would want to see would be in number 2, just say something like other services, or even
Yep.
spell out rules.
education.
okay, good.
So I just have a sort of practical question, like, how do we go about doing this? Like, do you target certain institutions? And,
That's
I
it.
mean, because
Yeah,
it's a lot
so-
of resources to
So one of the things we
negotiate something
talked
like
about
this.
in our working group is if the select board adopts this policy before the end of the year, then at the start of the next year or shortly after you adopt it, we would do a mailing, letting them know what the select board has adopted as a policy, explaining, why we're doing this, attach a copy of the policy, and ask them to, at first, voluntarily reach out to my office to discuss negotiating with the town and on this voluntary pilot program.
And then you take it from there.
And then we take it
Yeah,
from there.
right.
And then hopefully we have some suitors in town that'll do that. I think the Umbrella Center has reached out since I've been here a couple of times. I think that they know that this was being discussed. So perhaps maybe that's
What's
the
the timing? Is there a deadline in terms of when you think about the tax calendar?
This would be an ongoing process, so.
Right, but it isn't, my point is like, would they always start as of January 1? Would they always start as of July 1? I mean, is there a timing, or it could just start anytime?
Yeah, it depends on when we complete it and when it lines up with the next billing. But ideally, it would go on the next billing of when the select board adopts the agreement.
So
Because each one of these-
quarterly?
Quarterly,
Yeah.
right,
Quarterly,
just
okay.
like your tax bill, quarterly.
Okay.
So Anthony, remember when we were talking, we said that there are some non-exempts, not-for-profit, that also are generating revenue on their property?
Correct.
Right. And what were the implications of that again? Help.
Yeah, I'd have to, so, my recollection, and Steve brought this up, that if a property was actually generating income.
Right.
Then, he said by law, I'd have to double check it, but that could be taxed at 100%. So,
It was a negotiating point.
it's a negotiating
Yes.
point to
Yes.
say,
Right.
the town, if we really wanted to push this, could just tax you at the 100%, or
Right.
we could talk about this 25%.
Okay. Right. Okay, thank you. I knew that it worked in there somehow.
So maybe just a couple I think this is great. I think from a policy standpoint, I'm not sure you need to write a policy that has the percent of non-taxable stuff in it, just because it's going to change over time, if you know what I mean.
With the 25%?
No, not
no,
the
the
25%.
split- the split
No, the
among-
description, like the current makeup of the town, and
Oh, this
here's the
chart,
splits
the
of,
front
yeah.
page.
Like,
Yes.
from a
Yeah.
policy standpoint, I'm not sure
Yeah,
you
you're
need
right.
that in a policy, because it's going to constantly change, that's all.
Right.
So
Right.
it's great information, I'm just not sure it's what we need in the
Right,
policy
good
itself.
point. Yep.
So just think about hey, the policy just needs to really say, hey, you know what, this is what we want to go do.
It's a great point, and the policy that we looked at didn't have this chart. I incorporated this chart just for discussion.
It's great
purposes.
information.
Right.
Right. I'm just saying. Okay. And then I think this is one of those things, like the execution is every bit of, or more important than the policy itself. Like, we could call people tomorrow and say, hey, we've drafted a policy.
right.
It's not finalized, but you know what? I mean, I would suggest there really isn't much reason to hesitate. Why not start having conversations, right? Because we're bringing people along on the journey anyways, right? It's probably going to be more than one conversation no matter what, right? So you can start to say, hey, look, you know what, we are, this policy is going to be coming, and I just want to give you a heads up, and, hey, how can we work together kind of thing, right? So I think we can, start to maybe pull people in on the
I think they
journey.
know.
Play on the large.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. So, okay, so you know what I'm saying? Like, there shouldn't be hesitation. Like, hey, we have to wait until the select board approves, and we can't,
It gives
do
it
anything.
legitimacy,
Yeah.
though. I mean,
Yeah.
it gives it some
Absolutely,
serious,
absolutely,
right?
no doubt about it. No, I think we
Yeah.
should and want to do it. It's
Right.
just, let's not let that hold us up, is I guess all I'm saying, right?
Right.
You raise a good point, though, and I guess when I read this, I really thought that the second page where the bolded word policy
That's
down through the end of number 4, that was the policy.
what I thought it
Okay,
was. Yeah.
all right, if that's, sorry, then
Yeah.
maybe
Well, I
because
mean-
I'm reading the top thing,
Yeah.
the top of the
It's
first page is
the
like
purpose,
APP
yeah.
67 proposed,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
No,
For us. Yeah.
in my head, I just did that automatically. So, if two of us read it and we read it differently, that's reason enough to
Yeah.
sort of clarify.
Yeah.
And since I think we're going to talk about having a motion here.
No, I think I'm going to ask Anthony to make the
Okay.
changes that he
Yeah.
heard tonight
Mm-hmm.
and bring that to the select board on November 18th, after we've done all the rest of the work we're doing on November 18th. And then we'll vote on it then.
Okay. Yeah, I would be
Sounds
fine with that, and
Okay.
I think it's worth clarifying that one area is background and purpose, and then the policy
The policy is, right.
is
perfect.
Yeah, and then
section
the
is
things
called
we heard
policy.
from Terry
Yeah.
and about adding other services, I think that's a really good point. Okay, great, thank you,
Okay.
You're welcome.
Great.
thank you.
Thanks.
What? Yeah, I'm going home. Okay, I'm going to recuse, the next agenda item is something that I need to recuse myself for, so I'm going home.
Do you need to state a reason for it?
Yeah, you do, I think.
Because
You did before.
what did I say? Because it's my neighborhood and I know these people and I don't think I would be impartial.
Okay.
Sorry, and then just to be clear, before you leave, there's slides on the 250 update, but that's not on the agenda.
Information
So that's
only.
just information only.
They're
Got it.
coming in December
Got it. No, just wanted to double check. I was just like, okay, there's slides, but yes.
to talk about public safety, so we'll hear from them. But
Perfect.
their budget's in good shape, so I didn't think they
Nope,
needed to
that's
come
great.
in. Okay,
Perfect.
okay,
Thanks.
great.
Okay, great.
Also, Mary, before you leave,
What?
just to be clear, we have 2 meetings in December, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Because
Second and the
one
16th.
listed, and then it's
16th.
January, at the bottom of our agenda. So we have 2 meetings in December.
Okay,
December 2 and December
December
16.
16.
right.
Great.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, for our last agenda item this evening, we'll be discussing an update on the dog arbitration item that came before us before, and I think I'll turn to Town Manager Carrie LaFleur to introduce this.
Sure, thank you. So this item first came to you on July 29, 2024. This is a request by a resident for the board to schedule a dog hearing under provisions that are allowed through town bylaw and/or Mass General Law. At that time, we had special counsel come in and talk to you about this, what this was all about, because this doesn't come up on a very regular basis. I do believe, or I recall special counsel mentioning that the board doesn't necessarily have to call a hearing just because there's a request, that you can review the application and make a decision whether or not you feel that there is a sufficient basis for making the request. I can't remember whether or not counsel provided his opinion at the meeting. He has certainly shared that with me, and I don't want to put that on the table right now, but I'm happy to share it if you would like. So we reviewed this. You heard from our animal control officer. You know the extent and the time that the animal control officer put into trying to resolve this matter. She was unable to do so. There were several points in time that other members of the command staff at the police department were also involved and tried to resolve this. What you decided at that meeting was you requested that we pursue mediation. And so we gave that some thought and felt that we really had exhausted all of our internal resources. We reached out to C4RJ, which is a community-based restorative justice group. It did take a while to talk through what that process might look like, but I was very happy that C4RJ was interested in working with us and put together a proposal. So we asked C4RJ to pursue this. Aaron Freeborn, who is the executive director, is the person who took this on. She did reach out to both parties. She had what she felt were good conversations with each party individually. The next step was then to bring the parties together to have a collaborative conversation. And the complainant was interested in meeting. The other party was not interested in meeting. Aaron did try multiple times to get the other party to agree to meet. And after, I believe there were 3 attempts, even involving outside parties, there was no agreement for the 2 parties to sit down with C4RJ to move this forward. So we are at a stalemate, and so I wanted to report that to you because I asked for a continuance when I thought we might be able to move this forward. And so this is the periodic update, and we don't really feel that there is any place to go from a mediation perspective. So the board can decide.
And I'm assuming the same, nothing's changed in terms of the issues.
No, it still remains an issue from the complainant's perspective.
Okay.
So you can, you have several things that you can do. And I'm really not expecting you to do anything this evening. I think you have to think about this.
Yeah.
But you can review the complaint at some point and decide whether or not you feel that there is a sufficient basis to call a hearing, or you can just call a hearing. And then you can bring the parties in and, conduct that process. In either case, because it is a legal proceeding, I would recommend that we bring counsel back to walk us through this process if you move forward.
So when you say it's a legal proceeding, meaning that we would be issuing or voting on something that would be sort of a binding,
Yes.
like, action?
Yes, that can
Okay.
be enforced in court.
Okay.
Right. I think the complainant's request is essentially to declare the dog a nuisance with whatever
Yes.
the
Right.
implications of doing that are. So, it carries an impact.
Yep.
And if I recall, the dog officer did not believe the dog was a nuisance, so it's going to get into a lot of detail.
So
Right.
I think what I would say in response to that is there is a particular section of the law that deals, and I apologize but this is what the law says, a nuisance related to a sick person. And that is
that's different.
what is said in Mass General Law. And I'm not 100% sure that the ACO was making that distinction
fair.
when she was reviewing, because it's not something that comes up as regular. So there's a regular nuisance and then a nuisance
Yep.
for a sick person under the law.
Okay, so what do we do? Because my concern is that how are we going to know? Like there's a he said she said kind of thing going on, and like without sort of being an expert in this field and without having any sort of firsthand observables, it becomes very sort of like, okay, I don't. What do we do, right? So that's my concern, is like, how can we help?
Yes, and that the remedies would be outlined by counsel. So I think the decision here is, do you want to work with counsel to have a discussion to determine whether or not you feel there is a basis for calling a hearing?
Yep.
Or do you want to just call the hearing and sort of work through that process through the hearing?
Yeah. I feel like we might need counsel again.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Terry, do you have any?
Well, yeah, we might need counsel again.
I think so.
Would it be the same person that we had before?
Well, that person is the person I've found that specializes in this area of law. Doesn't mean that person is the only one, but I did first review this with town council, who really does not have any expertise in this area.
Right.
If there's a concern with that, council, I'm happy to see if there's an alternate, but I'm not sure that there is.
Actually, I have another question. And maybe you can't answer this, Carrie, maybe this has to go to council, but what are the consequences to the select board? Like, for example, if we decide not to have a hearing, can the board or the town get sued by the complainant? Or if we decide to have the hearing and the person who loses, what are the consequences to the select board or the town?
So I think anybody can sue anybody for anything.
Yep.
Right, so that, my understanding based on what council said, and I remember this because it was new to me. I've had a handful of these dog hearings in the past. I understood council to say that the select board could review the merits of the complaint and decide whether or not there was a sufficient basis. I did not understand that previously. So I think if this board reviewed and said, you know what, we do not believe that there sufficient basis exists because of X, Y, Z, it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be a suit, because anybody can sue. But I don't think that suit would have merit if the board went through a process and identified why it didn't find sufficient basis.
So I think I would like to understand the steps from here. For example, the process for trying to determine whether a hearing is warranted. It seems like there's a lot of volume on this already, and yet I will admit that I'm still somewhat unclear on the basic facts of this matter, and I'd like to understand from the council who specializes in this area a little bit more about what the basis of a hearing, particularly with this sort of novel complainant status. I mean, I think most of us understand, I remember him talking about various kinds of dogs, but I want to say vicious dog or something like that.
Yeah.
That's not hard to grasp. This is a little bit more challenging for me. So I think I'd like to engage in a process that brings us to a determination about whether to go with the hearing
Okay.
first. That would be my preference. I'd like to hear from the rest of you.
No, I would agree with that. The same opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree. I don't want to just bring it to a hearing.
Right.
Okay.
That may not be the right answer.
Terry?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So, I think that, I guess we would need to do that. Could we, it occurs to me that this is almost in the realm of training us
Yeah.
as opposed to deliberation. So I'm wondering whether, just in the interest of what we've been talking about our schedule, whether there might be a way to either get a briefing that would be oriented towards understanding our position within the framework of what the law says, and then come back and introduce this again at a later meeting where we actually make a decision about the hearing. So I'd also be interested in council's opinion about that, just in the interest of trying to be fairly efficient. Another way to do that, I could think of what might be to schedule something in our sort of slightly before a meeting
Yeah.
slot,
Yeah.
because this seems to be kind of a separate thing from our
Right.
normal business.
Right.
Is that,
And Mark, also, I think it might be helpful if individual board members have questions for council, we could send them in to him or her now. And then when they write this brief, they could address those questions, rather than they come in, then we ask the question, then they go back and research it.
yeah,
That's a
okay.
good point.
So
yeah.
let's give a week for consolidating questions. Carrie, is it okay if we just send them to you?
Sure.
And when we've got that together, we can then work on a mutually agreeable date with the council for a briefing on the particulars of the process. And once we've got that, then we'll come back and schedule another agenda item here where we would actually decide what our next process step was going to be.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay. Great. Does anybody have anything further on that? Nope.
No?
Okay.
Well, I guess one of my questions is going to be like, how is the hearing even conducted?
Yes.
You know, if council call on witnesses, or just Mark, since you're the clerk, chair pro tem, do you call the witnesses, you know, just to get the whole idea of how it even works, and to try to, just for planning purposes, like, are we gonna need to schedule one whole meeting or 3 whole meetings, or, you know, how does this all work?
Yeah. I think one of the questions that I would have too is that it seems that, you know, we've already expressed a desire to hear from both parties. And I think I'm actually wondering, and you can give us this information if you have it, whether or not, based on the contact that C4RJ already had, whether they developed some information about the parties that we could also review as a result of their attempt to bring this into a mediation situation. I'm curious about what happens if we call for a hearing and only one side shows
That's
up.
what I was afraid of, yeah.
Then, we might as well almost be just deciding based on what we have in front of us now. So
Yeah, and what
I
are
have
just
questions
and what are the
on-
implications if we just sort of compel them to say, look, we provided you with resources, we sort of asked you to
Yeah.
figure it out unless there's something you need to call the police for, then we have done, you know what I mean? Like, so what are the implications if we're just kind of
We don't
like,
have a
look,
hearing, right.
we don't,
Yeah.
it's not something we're going to step in and,
Mhm.
Yeah. I neglected to mention that I do not yet have the closeout report from C4RJ.
Okay.
Um,
That would be good.
But we had this time plugged on the
Yeah.
calendar,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to
yeah.
make
I think it'd
sure
be
we-
useful to see that
Yeah.
when
Yep.
it comes in.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
So anything else?
No.
No, okay. Seeing none. We have adjournment next, and we did not schedule any time for public comment, but I will, if there is somebody that has a comment on an item not on the agenda or something that we discussed, I'd take a comment now. And seeing none, I'd take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
second. I
I'll
thought
say
you,
second.
I was looking for a second. Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Myself, I'm an aye. Ms.
Aye.
McKinnon?
Aye.
Ms. Ravelli? Adjourned at 8:18. Thank you very much.